What do you think the disconnect is?
I think that there is a failure to recognize on the part of many people that the prison industrial complex is a money-making machine, that people will often say, oh, but private prisons make money. No, every single jail and prison is making money. The Department of Corrections has this massive budget. The police have this massive budget. They need to justify that budget. They need to justify their existence. And if they can't fearmonger around crime and say, we need to have more police in the subway, we need to make more arrests, we need to lock up more people, then they will lose their livelihood. So there is an incentive, a monetary, a financial incentive on the part of the police commissioner, for example, to say, oh, our city's unsafe. Oh, we keep releasing people who should be locked up, because that's what they want to do. They want to continue this system. They want to continue to lock up poor people and Black and brown people for minor offenses.
Crime is down in the subway system in March 2024. There also have been an additional 1,000 police officers deployed in the transit system. Do you see any correlation here at all?
No, I think that the additional officers in the stations are not, in fact, keeping us safe. For the most part, they're standing around playing Candy Crush on their phones. They're not actually doing anything to keep our city safe. And if you remember the horrible shooting that took place in Brooklyn in a subway station, that is a subway station where there is a police station. There is a police hub there, and they certainly did nothing to prevent crime there. So, I think the idea that additional police officers in our subway system will keep us safer is absurd.
I know that this is a larger conversation that really can't be narrowed down into one response, but you're saying bail reform does work. It's imperfect, but it's going in the right direction. But overall, the system is broken. Do you think that's what you're saying? And if so, how do we fix it or go in the right direction, in your opinion?
Well, you mentioned in my intro that I formerly ran for Manhattan District Attorney. I see that this system, and often I don't call it broken. I say the system is operating as designed. It's operating in a way that continues to marginalize and oppress people from marginalized communities already, Black and brown people, poor people, LGBTQIA folks, people with disabilities, people who have trouble navigating a system anyhow. And then those are the people who are targeted by our criminal legal system. And so I think that the way that we need to address these things is by not putting people through our criminal legal system, by providing funding for education, for housing, for food insecurity, making sure that people have what they need, making sure that people are able to get jobs and contribute to society, because that is the way that we address crime. People receiving mental health treatment and treatment for substance use disorder, not being locked up for those things. That is what would create a much better system and a much better society.
Republicans would say, not all, but some would say that response is what's considered soft on crime. What do you say to that?
It's funny because they often do say that. They use the phrase soft on crime. And in fact, the reality is that we just are allowing them to create a narrative where public safety equals incarceration, but that's not true. That's not what the data bears out. When you look at these longitudinal studies in places where they have stopped making arrests for minor offenses, for things like possessing a low amount of drugs, for trespassing, for jumping a turnstile, like fare beating type offenses, the city ends up safer because the recidivism happens when people are destabilized, when they are locked up for short periods of time. If they had a job, they lose that job. If you miss work for a few days, if you just don't show up for your job, you lose your job. Then you can't pay your rent, you lose your home. That is what creates more crime, as opposed to the alternative, which is making sure that we reallocate resources from police departments into things like housing, like education, like treatment programs, because that is how we would keep people safe.
And do you think the city's doing a good job on that? Can you give us a grade here? What's the city doing when it comes to those types of solutions?
Unfortunately, Mayor Adams has been an opponent of reform. I mean, once a cop, always a cop. Like, this is someone who has allocated more money to policing and to the police budget and to increasing the number of cops and meanwhile is cutting funding for programs, cutting funding for education, cutting funding for public libraries that now aren't even open on weekends. That is the exact opposite thing that we should be doing. And I really hope that the mayor will reconsider and will instead allocate funding for things like programs for education for the libraries.
I am curious what you would say to the average TikTok user who's scrolling through their phone, sees multiple accounts, young girls getting punched in the face, just walking down the street. It was an unprovoked incident. As you did say, crime is down year over year overall, but heinous crimes like rape and felony assault are up year over year. So what do you say when people see these accounts?
I would say try to keep an open mind, try to remain level-headed. Don't let them whip you into a frenzy based on a couple small things. And I'm not saying it was small for those people. I'm not invalidating their experience at all, because being punched is horrible. But I would say that people should follow people like me on TikTok, Eliza Orlins, and I talk about the ways in which people should engage with the police. I talk about different stories of things that really shouldn't be criminalized, and kind of showing a different picture of what the city is really like. And so I think that while it's easy to be whipped into a frenzy by certain users on TikTok and viral videos, or by the New York Post or by Fox News, that people should really take a step back, not miss the forest through the trees. Is that the right saying? But really make sure that they're focusing on the broader picture, which is that New York City is incredibly safe. As someone who takes the subway regularly, most days and even late into the night, I know how safe the city is, and I hope that people recognize that.
I know often people take one situation, one incident, and that's kind of, the standard bearer for a larger conversation here. You're a public defender in the city. What do you think is missing from the national dialogue?
I really think that, I've been a public defender in Manhattan for the last 14 years, and I've represented thousands of people. I have seen all the different types of crimes that do happen in New York City. And I think that really we need to be reframing the conversation about what public safety means. So many of my clients who are arrested because they're dealing with a mental health crisis, because there are insufficient ways to receive mental health treatment in this city. Because do you know the number one provider of mental health treatment in New York City is Rikers Island? There's something so deeply wrong with that people should be able to receive mental health treatment in the community. They should have easy access to that. People who are dealing with substance use disorder or addiction issues should have access to receiving that kind of treatment and services in the community. So the reality is the people who are getting arrested in our city are not, for the most part, hardened criminals on violent crimes. It's really minor offenses for people who are dealing with issues that would be better suited by being treated.
I know you had some strong words for Mayor Eric Adams. He said this reportedly, quote, "Stats don't matter if people don't believe they are in a safe environment." So to your point about reframing the narrative, reframing the conversation on public safety, how do you do that in an environment where people see these videos, they see the headlines, and they don't feel safe?
Well, Mayor Adams wants to have his cake and eat it too. He's the one who's sitting there saying, oh, New York City is safe. We live in a safe city. We live in a safe city. But then he's also the one who is fear-mongering around crime. And so that is creating this feeling of unsafe. The way that people are responding is thanks in part to the mayor himself fear-mongering. So if he and others would stop doing that, people wouldn't be walking through the city wondering if they were safe. Because they are safe. It's an extremely safe city. And so we really need to make sure that our elected officials, our leaders, the people who are supposed to be looking out for our city, aren't out there creating this propaganda and these false narratives.
Eliza Orlins, I appreciate your perspective today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on. It was great to talk to you.